Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're going to talk about setting big, audacious goals, never giving up on them, and embracing second chances when they are presented. Our guest is returning for a second episode to tell us about one of his second chances. Taylor Grist is with us today, and you might remember him from the first few weeks of this podcast. On episode 4, when he shared his experience climbing Mount Everest in 2021. It was an amazing episode, and his story really helped to set the direction for what this podcast would become. Taylor trained his whole life for the experience on Mount Everest by climbing famous peaks like Mount Rainier and Denali, as well as mountains and ice walls in New Hampshire and Mexico, Central America, and South America. He was completely ready and fully trained for the challenge of Mount Everest. Unfortunately, his Sherpa team came down with COVID only days before he was set to summit, and they had to turn back. 2 years later, this past May 2023, Taylor returned to Nepal, committed to finishing what he started, and he's back with us today to share the story of his second attempt on Mount Everest. Taylor, welcome back, my friend, to the campfire.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you having me.
Man, I can't believe it's been 2 years since we've been on here.
I know. I can't believe it's been 2 years since I've been invited back.
It's been a long time coming, man. Episode 4 was amazing. Highly recommend people go back if they want to learn about kind of the training and the build up to your first attempt on Mount Everest. I actually listened to it again yesterday in preparation for today, and there was just so many amazing nuggets on there, and it just got me super excited about today. But for those that maybe haven't listened to that episode, or if it's been a while, could we just kind of recap that first experience on Everest? Just kind of remind us sort of what that was all about.
Yeah. I travel 70% of the time for work. And, COVID in 2020 shut everything down around that March timeframe. My boss and I were actually in Chile coming back when this happened, and get back and, sit down with my wife, and everything starts closing down, as 2020 COVID, right? And then my wife is like, well, I don't know if I can have you here for a year or 2 years. And so recapping on it, her and I kind of stacked hands, and Everest was never a goal that I wanted to do. It was always out there, big audacious goal, always out there. But, when would you ever have time to train for it? When would you ever have time to actually put forth the effort and figure out a balance between work, life, and training? And so after my wife and I stacked hands, went to the next major person in my life, and that was my boss. And both of them were like, yeah, you know what? This is a goal we think is going to be good for you. You should give it a shot. And so from that point on, from March until March of 2021, just trained really, really hard. Like you said, ice climbing, Ecuador volcanoes, just a lot of training, and then, got the shot and left March 31st of 2021 and made our way through the Kumba Icefall, pretty uneventful. Did 2 rotations up and down through the Kumba Icefall to Camp 3 at 23,500 feet. And then, 65 days later, got the news that the trip was canceled due to our Sherpas getting COVID. And so from that point, we had a couple typhoons come through that season, pretty brutal season, weather, COVID, and just everything else that was going on. And took 2 days, humped it out, got back to Lukla, flew home, and then, kind of licked my wounds, got on a podcast with you, told my story, and then, started thinking about, hey, what's next? Am I going to really do this thing again? Or, ended up taking a full year off of anything major, just kind of backpacked and camped with the boys, 2 young sons. And after that, started having some conversations around, okay, this could be real again for 2023.
So there's one thing that you left out when you found out that the Sherpa team had COVID before the 2 typhoons came through. You said we didn't know what else to do, so we just got drunk.
Yeah, we did. We got pretty hammered.
I
so
mean,
it helped ease the wounds for sure.
and that makes sense. But I mean, in that podcast episode, you did say, I'm going to take 2022 off. And you said in that podcast episode 2 years ago, I'm going back to Everest in 2023. So you knew when we spoke. And I think when we spoke, it was probably 4 or 5 months after, maybe less than that, 3 or
Yeah, I
4
think
months
it
after
was.
you had gotten back. But like, can you like just kind of take us back to when you got the news that you weren't going to be able to make it?
Yeah, it was 8 of us. We were all in our dining room tent, and it was pretty much, we've had some Sherpa test positive up high. We didn't have all the details yet, everything. They're like, look, we're going to put a 24-hour hold on our summit rotation, and summit rotation 7-8 days up the mountain and then back down after you're acclimatized for Camp 3. They send us back to our tents. We get a good night's sleep, and then the next day, about midday, they're like, yeah, this is not going to happen. So pull the plug. The season was officially over from the climbing season, but then we were really close. We spent a lot of time together. You spend 2 months with people, like you get to know them, and so we all made the decision to really hump it out in the middle of a typhoon. So snow going out, turning into rain, mud deep up to your ankles, a lot of yak dung as you're going through as well, and so makes it pretty slippery trail back, and just humped it back for 2 days, and then had a little celebration dinner. Yeah.
It's tough, man. I mean, you did like I've known you for a long time. You've been training for this for such a long time. And I mean, this was just totally, this wasn't even weather. This was like just something completely unexpected. You were totally ready. You were totally trained, completely ready to go up. And this thing happened and it just shut you down. It's not like, there was no decision to be made. And by the way, I want to say, one of the things in that episode, I said it didn't matter to me that you did or you didn't summit. Like at the end of that episode, the way that I felt was like, you're still my good friend that climbed Mount Everest. It makes no difference to me
Yeah.
whether you made it to the top or not. But that's not the end of the story for you. So I'm curious, like at what point, like how long did it take? And do you remember like when your mind said, I'm coming back?
So my wife knows me better than anyone, and I
Yeah.
think she actually made the decision. She told me, she's like, if you don't do this, you're going to regret it, and she knows how I am, and she knows how I live my life. I think it was a couple months, maybe about the time of this podcast, whenever her and I really sat down, the podcast last time, and we sat down and like, hey, is this really something that you want to do? And I was like, yeah, it is. It's like, well, you need my permission first, then you go get your boss's permission. And so I would say once the decision was made, it was still a very hard decision, because after taking that year off, it was like, okay, it just takes a little bit of time to get right in your mind,
Mhm.
and just get right in your mind for, I'm going to be gone for 2 months. I'm going to leave my team again. I'm going to leave my family and children again. I'm going to leave everything behind. I'm going to be very selfish again, and I'm going to go climb this mountain that it's going to occupy a lot of time, and not just the point of being on the mountain, but the year of training that truly goes into getting ready again for it. And so I think when the decision was made was probably like the absolute decision when I paid the first deposit. It was like, okay, I got to start training now. So, and that was probably November or December of that following year. Yeah.
When you were coming back the first time, like, were you thinking on the plane, like, "I'll be back"?
I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sure it was always in the back of my mind that I would come back. Actually, no, it wasn't. So actually, I never wanted to come back. I
Okay.
didn't. I really didn't.
It's
It was
all
like,
coming back now.
yeah, it's all coming back now. I really actually did not want to come back, especially those first like months. It was like there's just so much that I missed, and so much that I knew would be ahead of me to do it again.
Mhm.
And when I did make the decision, and I kept saying it over and over to people, yeah, I'm going back, I'm going back. And once it became real, it really kicked in that, hey, we're traveling. COVID's not as much anymore, right? Still got to be careful. Everybody wash your hands out there. When I did make that decision, it was, okay, here we go.
Did you do anything differently the second time around?
I had to do a whole bunch different. First time I could make time without travel to work out and to do things before work, after work, and I could balance family a lot easier because they were home. I wasn't traveling. Second time around, I was traveling back to 60% of the time, 70% of
Mm.
the time in 2022, right? And so traveling a lot. So I had to balance work and family and training and life a lot more. Unfortunately, which gets the least priority is family. Family always suffers whenever you go through these things. And I tried to balance that the most. What I learned is that I had to train harder. I had to find different times to train. I had to manage my travel more respectfully for my family. Like, if I can get home earlier, I come home earlier. If I could thread the needle and get there right before a meeting and traveling, I would do that. And so I would just manage it a lot better. And then the training was the hardest piece, 6 days a week of training, going out with customers at night until 10, 11 o'clock at night, right? And then waking up at 4 or 5 to go train. It puts a little toll on you.
What was the 6 day a week? Like when you're not on a mountain, what does the training look like?
Yeah, so basically it's about 35 miles a week, 10,000 vertical gain, a little bit of running, 2 days of working, 2 days of strength. Saturdays are big days, 4 or 5 hour days, 5,000 foot vertical gains with a 25, 30 pound weight vest on, and then a lot of running. Last time I wasn't able to run as much because I tore a lateral meniscus, but this time I was much better.
And so home for you is the same as for me, Charlotte, North Carolina. So did you train in the mountains around here?
I did when I could get out on for like quick training, drive up to Crowder's Mountain. That's 800 feet, and I crunch that out for 4 hours, just up and
Mhm.
down as fast as I could. Once or twice a month, I head up to Mount Mitchell, crank that out a couple times, going up and down, 10 hours, 5 hours, stuff like that.
Yeah, and for those listening, Mount Mitchell is the highest peak on the East Coast. I think it's what, 6,200 feet?
66, something like that. It's somewhere in between. Yeah.
66.
I got lucky that my coach and I stayed pretty close. We're pretty good friends. Mark Postal, he's with Evoke Fitness. Him and I did a run on the Tetons, did some climbing, about 4 days in the Tetons, which kind of was a little litmus test back in August of 2022. And then in December, went down and finished up my plan from 2020, did Aconcagua, which is tallest mountain in South America.
Yeah.
And we did that via the Polish Glacier. So most people go the normal route. We did the Polish Great Glacier, which is just an pretty steep ice wall. It was about a 15-hour summit day there. So good little litmus test for me for I think we were there for 2.5 weeks, and then really just digging in for Everest.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. So you've got how many of the 7 summits?
Three of the hardest. Yeah, man.
Love it. The 3 of the hardest. So we'll have to talk about that, whether that's on your list or
Absolutely.
not. But I'm curious. So just go back to Mount Everest, and we won't cover a lot of the stuff that we talked about the last time around, and kind of the acclimatization and going up and down and through the Khumbu. But I'm curious, like, do you specifically remember getting to the point that you left off, like where you guys had to turn back around? Like, do you kind of remember those first few steps of like going further than you went last time? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I would say, getting to Kathmandu, if I can go through this real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
Getting to Kathmandu, it's an adventure in itself. Very uneventful, same as pretty much last time. It's an adventure, right? It's an adventure travel. A little bit over 24 hours to get to Kathmandu from Charlotte.
Mhm.
From there to Lukla, you take a helicopter or fixed wing flight, and then once you get to Lukla, it's about a 39-mile hike in the base camp. at 17,500 feet. So very, very similar. A lot of the same people staying in some of the same places. People know you, they remember you. My guide this time was Naren, and he was my guide the last time on 21. And I also was lucky enough to have a couple really good guides. Casey Grom, he was on the same trip as us with a private client. And then my coach, Mark Postal, was on the same trip with a private climber as well. So all three of it was like bringing the game back together.
That's amazing.
And so it was actually pretty cool just hiking in with everyone and just getting back to where we were at base camp. From there, what changed? Most people do 2 rotations. We were feeling pretty strong, so we only did 1 rotation this time. You climb a peak on your way in called Lobachet East, which takes you right up about 20,000 feet. And so from there, you get 1 acclimatization climb in, kind of 1 rotation. And so when we got to base camp, we did some training for a week or something like that. And then we did our first rotation. That first rotation took us up to Camp 3, and that was where my last point was. But when we woke up at Camp 2 and we were heading to Camp 3, Camp 3, you have to go through the Bertrand and go up the Lhotse face, which is a steep blue ice wall to hit Camp 3. Man, I got to the bottom of the Bertrand and I just couldn't go any further. I was weak. I was tired. I just didn't feel it. And I felt just like I started crying. I looked at my guy and I was like, I can't go anymore. And on the way down, we ran into Casey's partner, and she's pretty cool. She was on my climb the last time, and she's like, don't worry, man. He's like, the mind, I'm not going to say the cuss word she said, but she said, the mind does crazy things to you. You'll be fine. And gave me a big hug, and I was on my way down, and she was on her way up. And it was definitely different in the fact that on that rotation, I didn't get to make it to the last point. So when we came all the way back down and we were in base camp, we're sitting there and we're waiting for our weather window. So we got the first weather window, and just for kind of the weather window was from May 12th. My rotation was from May 12th through May 19th.
Okay.
So we woke up the morning of the 12th. Beautiful weather was predicted for a summit. We were looking at the 16th to summit. Beautiful weather was in the clearing, was in the forecast. And we woke up about 2 a.m. and we started heading up and doing our rotation. So when I did, and we'll come back to that, but when I did hit Camp 3 again, it was totally different than the first time. It was a lot harder, and we were sleeping or trying to sleep, and that's where you start oxygen. So the first time around, I didn't start oxygen because we were not on our summit rotation. So when I did get there, I felt a sense of relief, but because I've been there before. But there's also the sense of the unknown of the Camp 3 to summit all the way back down that I did not know. So a whole different story there.
So Camp 3 is that's as far as you guys got the last time. So once you got to Camp 3 and you're heading up, this is like new territory that you haven't hit before. Like, what did that feel like?
So there's a lot that goes into this, right? And so if I can just kind of give you and everyone else kind of a glance of the 2023 spring season and what we were up against, it might kind of help for what we encountered above Camp 3. There was 478 permits issued in 2023. This is the most permits ever issued on Everest. And there were 47 teams. Of those 47 teams, I believe there was 89 Americans total. And it generated about 5.8 million in royalties for the Nepal government. This is one of the largest revenue generators that there is. It's also the second highest summit rate since 2006. So about 1,200 climbers were geared up to go. So that's a little village inside of a base camp.
Okay.
Of that 1,200, 600 people succeeded in summiting. So a 50% success rate. 300 of them were Sherpa or guides, and 250 clients. And the whole summit window was from May 15th to May 26th.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So pretty big window. It was also kind of the major issues that we were experiencing or that were around. It was the coldest May in 30 years, like the coldest May in 30 years. Also, the logistics above Camp 2, they were pretty obsolete. And logistics meaning not enough oxygen, not enough tents, not enough stoves. and more people than should have been there. And the reason why the logistics were kind of all messed up is because from my view, right, and I think from others, is that there was a strange upper respiratory virus going around at base camp, which not COVID, but like an RSV or something like that. And
Mhm.
it really decimated our porters and our Sherpas. And so we still had that going around. So there wasn't enough people to carry stuff up the mountain to make sure that logistics were covered very high up. The north side was still closed. And so with China still being closed, it puts more people on the south side. So
Okay.
that's between 100 and 150 people extra on the south side of the mountain. And then COVID was still present, even though, I mean, it's still around, right? So it tied for the deadliest season on Everest to date, with 17 people that died. So what's normally a 3% death rate would turn out to be a 5% death rate. Most things that you'll read, it was because of inexperienced climbers joining low-cost operators, and then I would say the weather really took a toll on a lot of people. That was the spring season at a glance.
You were supposed to have good weather.
Yeah, we were supposed to have good weather. When we got our weather window, which was that we were eyeing the 16th, winds were at a acceptable level. The whole week of May 12th to the 19th, the winds were getting lower and lower and lower. So when we left on the 12th, after we did the one rotation. So we left at 2 a.m., went through the Kumba Icefall. We stayed at Camp 1 for one night when we got there. From Camp 1, we went to, oh man, I missed a good part on probably the scariest moment below Camp 3. So one rotation, we're going from Camp 1 to Camp 2. Kind of beautiful day. Camp 1 to Camp 2 is not that far. Not too much elevation gain, but it is riddled with crevasses, just stacked up upon each other, and deep, wide, everything. And so my guide and I, Naren, we were walking through. We had another friend and his guide were behind us. They weren't roped with us. It was just Naren and myself roped together. And so we're about halfway between Camp 1 and Camp 2, and there's this crevasse. It's maybe 2.5, 3 foot long, maybe 3 foot long, right? It's got a lip on the bottom that you step on, and then you kind of just jump up a little bit to the other one. And so here I am. Other people in front of us, they do it. And so I go, put my foot down, get ready to jump. The whole thing collapses. and so collapses. My guide's already on the other side. He self-arrests. I'm dangling underneath the crevasse, looking down like, oh man. And then the guide with my friend behind us drops me an anchor. I clip it into my belt just for secondary. And then all of a sudden I look up and I see 3 porters jump over me. And within 10 minutes, they have me yanked out.
Wow.
And right when I get out, my guy goes, "Did you have any flashes of your life?" And I was like, "No, it's just get me the blank out of here. Like, get me out of here. Like, I
Oh
don't
my
want to dangling." And so ever since that point, it's I have had a hard time. I had a really hard time with crevasses throughout that whole time. I got stage fright. It was like, oh man, like I'm gonna fall in again. But we worked through it, and we made it to the summit, and everything was fine.
Oh, it's crazy, man.
I know. We went to Camp 2. So I think we spent 2 nights at Camp 2. Then we moved up to Camp 3. Camp 3, we went on oxygen. My one of my thermarests was left at Camp 2, so I was sleeping on a pad in between my guide and my coach friend because his client had to bail. She got the upper respiratory thing, so she couldn't make it.
Okay.
So I got really lucky. I had 2 guides, and I was in the middle, and so left one of my pads at Camp 2. So instead of having 2 pads, I have 1. So I was sleeping in a dip in between them,
Nice.
and just trying to keep warm. And that's where we went on oxygen. We woke up early. Well, you don't really sleep above Camp 2. You really don't sleep. And so when we got up and started getting moving, changed out our oxygen at Camp 3, and we started moving up the Lhotse face toward the yellow band, it's pretty steep. It's cold, but not undoable, right? It's like you're like, okay, 1 foot in front of the other. I can do this. I'm breathing oxygen. I'm running, 2.5, 3 liters, right? Feeling good. So we get up the yellow band. Everything's going great. We start traversing across, getting ready to go up Geneva Spur. make it to the top of Geneva Spur. We're all doing really well. You get to the top of the Geneva Spur, and you can like look back, and you see really all the way down to Camp 3, all the way down the glacier, and you could start to see the crowds kind of forming. People with large groups, like I had the first time that I went, the Western teams and stuff like that. So if you think about it, like each person has to have a climbing Sherpa. So one person becomes two people. So me with a group of, I was 3 people, 2 guides and myself, but we only had to have 2 climbing Sherpa. So we were a group of 5, right? And so once you reach top of Geneva Spur, we started seeing that crowd coming. You drop down to Camp 4, which sits at 26,000 feet. And
Okay.
Camp 4 is what they say. It's a salvage yard for sure. They've done a really good job of cleaning a lot of it up, but it's still weather torn tents that are just scattered. It's broken everything. It's a salvage yard.
Yeah.
When we got there, wind was blowing pretty good. It was picking up, and became very clear. Not enough oxygen for people. Not enough tents for people. Not enough stoves to melt water. We had our own stove. We had a tent, but people were trying to like put 4, 5, 6 people into a tent. Like it just doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
And so we made a decision most people stay at Camp 4 for a few hours, get some rest, free fuel, and then do what they need to do. Me, Naren, and Mark, we made a decision and took like a second. We got rid of everything that we did not absolutely need. Kind of stacked hands, laid back, said, okay, we got there at 4 p.m. We said at 6 p.m. we're leaving for the summit. And so 6 p.m. rolls around, we're packed up. We actually start heading for the summit around 6:37 at night. We start moving up the triangular face, and the wind's picking up pretty good. It's getting pretty cold. The crowds are getting bigger and bigger. You can see it. And so we hit the balcony, and the winds are blowing pretty solid. On the balcony is where you change out oxygen. And so we changed out oxygen. I tried to suck some goo down. Whenever you're on bottled oxygen, it's not like being on bottled oxygen down here. It's like pure oxygen, pure compressed oxygen. And so your body adjusts for that in the way that it builds up phlegm in your throat. And so where it's really hard to take to like swallow, it's really hard to do a lot of things. So trying to suck down gooey goos it doesn't work out too well. So we literally had probably 1 liter of bottle of water, a small one in our down suit. We're wearing a negative down 40 suit at that point in time, and maybe 5 goos to get us up and back. So when we hit that balcony, it was blowing. Changed out oxygen, started moving up toward the south summit, and all of a sudden, I'm like, something's not right. I can't breathe. And so I kind of nudged my guide Naren, and we're family, right? I mean, it's like, hey man, like I can't breathe. Something's wrong. He said some words around, cussing at me, like, you're gonna be fine, whatever. He's like, it's all good. And I was like, okay, all right, I trust you. Start going. I'm like, something's not right. So my mask is sticking to me like a octopus tentacle, pretty much. And it's just like every time I breathe, it's like, oof. And so I'm like, okay. So I take my mask off. I was like, we got to do something. Like something's wrong. What happens is that when it gets really cold, that the bottom of your regulator, your mask, freezes with the humidity that's coming out, all the snot and all the good stuff, right? And it freezes, and it just freezes solid. And so we undid it. It was frozen solid. You can't break it out. It's just way too cold. We were carrying extra masks, so we were able to flip out the old mask for the new mask, and from there we were on.
Okay.
And so and so these are the things you're dealing with, and
I'm feeling this with you.
yeah. And so these are things that you're working through at let's say 27 and 28,000 feet, right? So not the things you want to be having to worry about at that point in time. So about 30 minutes into that, I'm like, God, my hands are freezing. So I have to switch to my mitts. My hands are just really cold. I mean, it was really cold. It's when we started moving up to the south summit. We get up to the south summit, and sun's starting to reach up through the horizon, and you can actually see the sun coming up. And I just took a minute just to take a breath, and look around. It was pretty surreal and pretty cool just to see the Tibetan plateau, and then Nepal to the south side. And so it was really, really cool moment in my life that's kind of imprinted in my brain. Then we hit the South Summit. We started across the cornice, traverse, just jagged edges, and a lot of granite. That's just moving across granite with no traction and crampons. And crampons, these 12 points that
Mhm.
you're shooting sparks everywhere because it's just like you're not sticking. So pretty scary moment and there. Then we hit Hillary Step, and a lot of people on the Hillary Step going up and down, just like a bottleneck for sure. Once we got through that, we made our way up to the summit. Got some really cool pictures. We were on the summit for probably 10 minutes at the most because it was so cold. I think when I went back and I looked at the weather for that day, it was like negative 22 degrees with like a 12 to 15 mile an hour winds, which equates to like negative 40 plus with the wind chill. And so it was really cold. I was feeling really, really cold. And so we wrapped up, tried to get a goo down, threw up in my mouth a little bit, and then tried to get some water down, but didn't have really enough water. And so then from there, we started moving down, and we got back to the South Summit, realized that the oxygen we thought we had was not there. And so we were really pretty low on oxygen. So we started humping it back down to the balcony where we changed out some oxygen, then down to Camp 4. Mark Postal, my friend and coach, he actually ran out of oxygen about an hour out of Camp 4. And you can survive for a little bit without oxygen, especially when you're acclimatized, but not too long. We also passed a couple people that, one of them was stuck on the line, just couldn't get off the line. And then once we got back to Camp 4, so we summited May 17th at 8:33 a.m. And then once we got back to Camp 4, I think it was around 6 p.m. that evening. So we had been gone for roughly 24 hours, the total trip to Camp 4.
Yeah.
Back to Camp 4, I think we slept like 14 hours, woke up, and then continued our descent downwards. But
Camp 4, 14 hours. That's at 26,000 feet.
yeah, it's still another 2 days down, right? Once you
Yeah.
hit the summit, it's still another 2 days down. I have this picture that I'll share with you that you can share, but it's a picture of what success actually looks like. And so this picture of me is when I got back to Camp 4, took my mask off, and just kind of took a picture of my face. And I truly look like an 80-year-old man. My face is swollen on one side from just having the oxygen so tightened down on it, and just like I look like an 80-year-old man. So I'll share that with
Man,
you.
we're gonna take a look at what success looks like. And
Exactly.
I want to go back to the summit for a minute because I kind of glossed over that, and I know you were tired, and but just take me back to the summit for a minute. I mean, did you get to have a moment up there of? We talked about it on our first episode together. That word awe, like, did you get to have a moment of awe up there on the summit?
The whole thing was all right. I mean, I know it sounds cliche,
Yeah.
but like everything above Camp 3 was all. Like it's nothing I ever seen in my whole life. It could be good all or bad all
Yep.
because there's a couple types of all, right?
Fear and
Um,
wonder.
yeah. So, but everything above Camp 3, which I had not experienced before. I mean, let me say this: there's very little and tiny bits of humanity up there, and very glimpses that you actually see of that. And so, being on the summit it was awesome. Like, but 85% of people die coming down. So it's like your mind, yeah, you're there, you get pictures, and I was extremely excited, but I was also extremely cold, been up for almost 72 hours, and like, let's wrap this up, let's get down, and let's get moving, right? Because I don't want to be up here for longer than I need to be.
Did you like in that summit attempt, whether it's the minutes before you get there, while you're there, on the way down, did you feel any emotion?
A lot. So I remember I said on that one rotation we did up to Camp 3, I cried. When
Yeah.
I got to the top, my guy was like, "Are you not going to cry?" I was like, I'm so dehydrated, I have no water to cry." So, I was like, "I'm crying inside." But yeah, there's a lot of emotion. I think the more emotion comes out when you actually get down and you get back to like a safe place,
And you
like
feel
back
safe.
in Kathmandu,
Yeah.
and then you're like, okay, now I can start living.
So, you mentioned, the crowds, and I do wanna just hit that real quick because I have seen some pictures online of, like, it's almost like a line at Disney, like, going up. Did I mean, was that is that real? Like, did you see that kind of those kinds of lines on Mount Everest?
So on my summit day, 100 people summited, 100 people. And so there were some big lines. I would say those big lines are, look, there's big groups on Everest, right? So like if you think about my 2021, if we would have made it to the summit, we were eight, we would have been a group of 16 plus our guides with their Sherpa. That would have been a group of 23 people in one group that are trying to make their way to the summit. So the crowds are definitely prevalent. But they're team crowds, I would say,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. I would also say when you're in a smaller group, which I'm glad I did this time, we were able to going up from the balcony at I think like 27,000 feet to South Summit, 28,000 feet, and then higher. We're actually able to unclip from the rope, clip to each other, and crank our oxygen up a little bit more and move around people at a faster rate. And so
Yeah.
a little bit more dangerous, but a lot more calculated instead of standing in line, waiting to shiver and be cold. We would actually get off the beaten path, get around them, and move up faster.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing too that I thought about is like, I mean, you're on Mount Everest, like you have to be completely aware. There's danger all around you. But I feel like when you're in a place where there's like a lot of people all doing the same thing, like somehow like it feels safer because there's like other people. And I'm just curious, like up at, 26, 7, 8, 9,000 feet, did you experience that, or were you able to kind of, like, maintain the fact that, like, yes, there's people around, but this is, like, still very dangerous and I've gotta stay alert?
Both. So one, yes, there's people around. Yes, there's inexperienced people, which scares the whatever out of me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, they fall, they grab, they bring you down with them. It's like a
Mhm.
drowning person, right?
Yeah.
The glimpses of the opposite of that is watching my friends who we talked to almost daily inside of our camp, who weren't a part of our team, but actually seeing them come down from the summit or summit before us or see them crossing. Those were the glimpses where it's like, yeah, you know what? It's not as bad as what it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things like, this time in May obviously was your 2nd attempt.
Yes.
I have to believe that the fact that I'm sure you were disappointed the first time around, but, like, having to go back, do it a second time, and to be successful, to reach the summit, to hit your goal, like, does that not make it the fact that you didn't get all the way to the top, does that not make it a more rich experience overall?
It does. It does. It was the support system that I have that allowed me to actually go back and do it again, like, and actually finish something that I started and actually be able to say, I climbed the highest mountain in the world, right? And I made it back unscathed. Like there was a lot of frostbite, like there was a lot of deaths, a lot of frostbite, a lot of things, and I made it back without. I mean, I got very blessed, I would say, and so it does. It makes it so much more. I'm so much more appreciative.
It's I mean, I'm so inspired. Another thing, like, that I've noticed just about you, like, in the first time and even since the second time, I know that you got to know a lot of people through this experience and you've developed a lot of really close relationships. Like at one point, after the first time, I think it was before the second time, I watched the movie 14 Peaks on Netflix, and this is Nims Purja, and he goes out and does the 14 highest peaks in a year. I think it was. It's a super cool movie. But I remember like texting you about it, and you were like, "Oh, I know that guy. Oh yeah, I know that guy." Like I just like it's a
Yeah,
small community, right? Like when you get into it, that climbing community.
it very much is. It very much is, and you run into people all the time, like Killian. We ran into in 2021. We ran into. There's some major climbers out there
Yeah.
that are, yeah.
So what is like, I mean, you're in that community now. Like what has it been like for you to be able to just kind of like be with those people, be in that environment and have kind of like those contacts? Like how has that helped like make your life more fulfilling? I mean, really?
I wouldn't say it makes my life more fulfilling. I would say they're athletes, they're pros, right? They are. This is what they do. They take people to the highest peaks in the world, and they do it twice a year, right? Um, I am in awe at what they do
Yeah.
because I look back and it's like, you know, I I balance, right? I balance my career versus my climbing ambitions versus my family, right? And they get to do this all day long. And
Yeah.
so I'm more in awe of like what all they accomplished and what all they've done. And so
Yeah.
I I wouldn't say I gain anything from it. I say was it in a valley full of giants?
Well, that's I mean, the reason why I
Yeah,
asked that question is I mean, like to a much lesser degree, like this, I mean, this podcast makes me feel that way. Like to be surrounded by people that are doing such amazing things, it fills me up. Like it inspires me. It makes me want to go do more things. And so, like just listening to your story is getting me all fired up. Like one of my bucket list items, and I've talked with you about it, is absolutely to go do the base camp trek. I do wonder when I get to base camp if I look up at the face if I'm gonna feel like, "Oh, wow, I wanna do that too," but we'll start with
you're
base camp. But
yeah.
I'm just
You
it's
be
inspiring.
careful. Be careful where your feet take you.
I don't know. It's just inspiring to be surrounded by such amazing people and to, like, be able to, have those people to be able to tap and ask questions and, have that real contact. I mean, you and I have known each other for a very long time, and, it's one thing to watch about a mountain climber on TV, but it's another thing to know somebody that you're so close with and to know, like, my good friend Taylor has summited Mount Everest, and I'm just so proud of him, and it's just so cool to watch what he's done and the hard work that he's put into it. And I know it was hard. I know it was hard on your wife and your kids but but it's super inspiring, man. And so I guess that brings me to um that inspiration. How has this helped you as a dad and what conversations have you had with your kids about adventure and climbing big mountains and setting big goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say patience again, right? I think I said it the first time. I'm learning patience more and more. Like I think we said this last time too. A very goal oriented person with a lot of drive. You learn patience as, especially in Nepal. You got a lot of time. You got a lot of time to downtime. You got a lot of time for just yourself. And so patience is what I'm trying to be continue to be better at. And then, passing it along to my children who, they get excited, right? They they're kids. And so really just leaning into their passion of what they want to do. So we've done a lot of camping. Like when I got back, we spent a lot of time going to outdoor concerts. We spend a lot of time camping, kayaking, canoeing. Just a lot of time. It's just a family doing these outdoor things that they really love. And so it's for me, it's just leaning into whatever they want to do, just leaning into what they want to do and not just saying no, which I like. Parents, myself included, are very good at saying no, but maybe sometimes say yes and see how it ends up. And you never know what's going to happen. You never know how it's going to help them grow. So being outdoor with my children, I'll tell you this. I did this before in 21. I took my oldest on a hike, and I did the same thing for my youngest this past time before whenever I got back. And so basically it was a 9 miles, 6 hours, 3,600 vertical feet. And by the time they reach almost the top, they're like crying to go down. And so watching them push past that and wanting to finish and then coming back down and like having a big steak dinner on a fire on a fire pit, they're like, Dad, thank you so much. So like, you know, like what people have done for me throughout my career and for climbing and for work is like pushing me outside of my comfort zone and
Yeah.
seeing what I can do. And so that's what I can give to my children. It's just
Yeah.
pushing them just a little bit harder so they don't break, but they know they can do it. Yeah,
Yeah. I love that. And your work was also very supportive in all this.
they were. They
Giving
were.
you the freedom to be able to do this twice. I know I asked you this question the last time, but how did this second experience make you a better leader?
It made me a better leader. So when I left again this time, I This is a funny one. So, I had new people on my team. So the people from 2021 were still there, and they still joke around. Taylor left us for 3 months. Taylor left us for 4 months. I'm like, no, it was only 60 days. So when I left this time, I'd actually hired someone, and about 3 days later, I was leaving for Everest, and I told the guy, I said, I'm hiring you because I think that you're the right person for our organization, because I'm leaving for 2 months to go climb Everest. And he kind of looked at me with these eyes like, you're leaving? And I said, yep, but you're gonna have a great onboarding plan. I got a 7-week onboarding plan for you. Everything's laid out. And so I get back, and he's like fully up to speed. I'm traveling with him. I'm like, man, this is the great onboarding plan I've ever had. And then my boss like, maybe you should leave 2 months every time. And I'm like,
I mean, there you go. You crushed it, man. That's a huge win right there.
It is. Leadership comes in many different forms. I try to lead by example, and I try to be in the trenches with my team a lot, and they know that, and they also know that I'm a resource and I'm a tool for them as well. So I try to be more of that and listen more, and lead by example.
Man, we could keep talking for hours.
I know.
So I have to ask, you've been to Mount Everest twice.
Yep.
Is there going to be a third time?
So I don't think I'll ever climb Everest again.
Okay.
And I keep going back. People ask me all the time, and I keep going back. 8,000 meter peaks are for young people. I'm not young anymore. I mean, it's pretty hardcore up there, man. It's a young man's game up there. I'll never say never. I would love to, as my kids get older and they want to trek in or they want to climb it, I'd trek into base camp with them. I'd support them. I think 8,000 meter peaks for this time period in my life are behind me.
How about the 7 summits?
Yeah, totally. Gonna knock that out.
Are you?
Yeah. So I got Everest, Aconcagua, and Denali. Got Vincent, Carson Pyramid, Elbrus, and Kilimanjaro left. I would like to say Kilimanjaro, since it's non-technical. I'd like to say that for my children and I.
Yeah,
and
totally.
and just knock that out for the last one. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be amazing. So, look, I know Mount Everest is a huge, lifetime goal, something that you have to train for years. But I'm just curious, if you sparked a seed in anybody listening right now, if you want to climb Mount Everest at some point in your life, how does one get started?
Yeah. So that's a really good question, Scott. It could be Mount Everest in like the real mountain, or it could be the Mount Everest of whatever you want to do, right? And so I still believe, the only way to do it is to step outside your comfort zone, put one foot in front of the other, and see where it leads you. And I really believe that. And if it's something you like, you got to put your all into it. Like, you got to train hard. You got to train hard. You got to be, you got to get your dietary. You got to do everything that you need to do to be able to succeed, because at 29,035 feet, no one else cares. It's your own 2 feet that are going to get you up and get you down, and it's your taking care of yourself. So I would say just one foot in front of the other and get out there and get it.
Love it. All right, Taylor. So the last time we talked about this, I asked you about Hollywood because, first time around, we knew Hollywood was going to hear about your story. They were going to make a movie about you. And you said that for the first attempt on Everest, when they make a movie about you, that you were going to actually play yourself.
Yeah.
And the name of your movie was going to be Untangled.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's time for a sequel. And this is the one where you get to the top. So are you still playing yourself?
I'm still playing myself.
All right. Have you gotten untangled?
I would still say the name of the movie is Untangled.
Untangled too.
Yeah, Untangled too. It's man, there's a lot of entanglement out there, man, honestly. And as you get older, your kids get older, more things creep in upon you. This, work gets more intense. Like, people want more and more of your time. And it's just untangle is what it is, man. I live by it. You gotta find time for yourself and for what's important in your life. So
I love it, man. Well, you're so humble. Like, I really, really appreciate you spending the time today. It's a super incredible inspiration what you did, and I know that people listening are going to be pumped. If people want to see like pictures or find out more about your experience, is there a way for them to do that?
Yeah, email or text me.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Yep,
we can put that information in the show
yeah,
notes.
yeah, and I'll also send you a whole bunch of pictures too.
Amazing.
I got thousands.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your time. And I hope that for those listening, you have been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Taylor's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Taylor, man, thank you so much for being here. It was awesome.
Thank you. I love it. Appreciate it, man.